this was a good week of chapters, even though there was no Black Clover and Mashal this week. So relatively it was a quote-unquote short one, but there was still some major news from One Piece. Speaking of, we're going to start off with One Piece, chapter 1044, and this chapter was very good, showing off Luffy's awakened ability and seeing the end of Orochi. With those two major events, this chapter was very good. Now, the big reveal of Luffy's awakened devil fruit comes with a lot more questions than answers. For example, we learned that the Gum Gum fruit is actually the human fruit model Nika, as in Nika the sun god. So what does that mean in more storyline terms? There's a lot of guessing at this point. They explain that the power is that you eat the fruit, you get rubber abilities. When you awaken it, your power becomes the most ridiculous in all the world. Because now anything is possible, kind of, with this power, in terms of pure silliness, as well as the fact that the whole point of this fruit is to put smiles on people's faces, as well as the user's face. So with this explanation, the conclusion is drawn that Joy Boy is actually more of a title than an actual person. For example, Luffy is, in fact, a Joy Boy, not the one and only Joy Boy, meaning that throughout history after the 100-year void century, there have probably been a couple of Joy Boys, or maybe there haven't been any at all. It's hard to say because, again, Luffy is the only one that fits the bill of Nika to a T. And what I assume is in that void century, Nika plays a critical role, as this devil fruit is basically him. He, Nika, the sun god, was turned into a devil fruit, and nobody was able to actually successfully eat him, it would seem, or eat the fruit, whatever, until Luffy. So Luffy awakens the devil fruit. He's all giggles and laughing like crazy, bouncing around as he does. Everyone sees and or feels that Luffy's alive. Many of the heroes celebrate, and many of the villain characters end up losing consciousness. Luffy then is able to grab Kaido, rip him back up to the roof so that they can continue their fight. And the way this devil fruit seemingly is working at the moment is it takes on the properties of both a zone devil fruit awakened and a paramecia, as Luffy was able to grab a piece of the ground and give it a rubbery quality to redirect Kaido's attack back at him. Again, he also now has improved stamina and durability, making him tougher to beat. Now, that could just be because that's what Luffy wants or needs, who knows, but for now, he has any ability he seemingly wants, and he can use all of his other gears to his heart's content in what is now known as Gear 5. So this battle gets one more round, even though Kaido had officially won. Luffy said he wants a rematch right away. So we'll end up seeing who wins this final round and see if Luffy can pull out the victory, which at this point he's going to. Now, I'm curious if Kaido dies in this arc. I would be surprised if he didn't at this point. Leading to the other major event of this chapter is the fact that Hiyori was able to see the death of Orochi, as she continues to tell him he's a hypocrite and a bad person overall, allowing him to be crushed by the rubble, and eventually the flaming ghost of Kanjuro arrives, and unfortunately for Orochi, seemingly just wants to cling to Orochi. Ends up mistakenly attacking him after Orochi wants Kanjuro to kill Hiyori. It backfires, and it looks as though Orochi is going to burn to death, which is oddly fitting for him to go out in that way in front of one of Odin's children. So with that plot thread now neatly tied up, there is nothing left but the defeat of Kaido, which will most likely happen on Onigashima here and finish the entire arc off with an enormous bang. I'm curious to see, with most of the enemies probably down and out for now, what's going to happen. Is Luffy just going to beat him on the island and the island does not fall? Does Momo bring the island down to the ground so they can finish it on a stable area, allowing everyone to escape? Does Momo grab everyone and escape with them, leaving it that it's Luffy and just the bad guys, and Luffy will end up escaping on his own, while Kaido and all of the beast pirates plummet to the ground on Onigashima, thus kind of dying in the process? There's a whole bunch of things that could happen with this final bit of this arc, but at this point it is looking inevitable that Luffy and Co. will win. However, there will be a large recovery period leading to a lot of info dumping on what's happening outside of Wano, as well as what's probably going to happen in the fact that Momo is 100% backing down from his word and he will not open the Wano country. They'll have to try to convince him to do otherwise and follow his lead. Maybe if we're lucky, Hiyori takes over instead of Momo, and maybe Momo joins the crew but now gets berated by everyone because he's no longer a child. We'll have to see. It's looking very much like things will change after this arc, and I'm curious to see what avenue is going to be taken. But for now, overall, I'm going to give this chapter an A. It was excellent, seeing the awakened devil fruit, as well as the reveal of what the Gum Gum fruit actually is, and seeing that the end of this fight is on the horizon is exciting, especially seeing as how the rest of the world is just as intriguing as what's going on in Wano. The story itself is reaching an absolute peak and is going to keep barreling down that way, probably having one last rest stop at Elbaf to get probably more allies on board and to regroup one final time in safety before making their final march towards Raftel. That's what I'm going to predict in this moment here, seeing as how there's really nothing else that can happen at this point. The adventure is nearly done, at least for the first part, because the way I see this story ending is that Luffy and Co. will just continue to adventure. We won't get some massive time skip. Maybe we will, and it's the end where Luffy's executed like Roger, and a new pirate age is set off after Luffy's had quite the pirating career, leaving it that they can make films forever of what the Pirate King did, while allowing anything else to have new fun ways, as the story just simply ends with a new beginning. We'll have to see if that comes true or not, as well as what is the actual treasure of the One Piece. So now we're on to Undead Unluck chapter 104, and this was a good chapter, seeing Andy more or less lose to Seal and having to figure out a way to defeat Seal from the inside. We see that every person Seal has absorbed is actually not killed, but kept inside of its chest cavity and is forced to give it their powers by touching its core. We also see that Lucy, the girl that Andy was protecting, is also still alive, but is able to seemingly separate herself from her physical body, which was bizarre. Maybe Uma Ghost caused it, where you can actually take ghost form, and that's what Lucy's doing to get Seal sick, which is a very interesting way to counterbalance Seal. I imagine Andy will do something similar, and they'll find a way to win, as Seal ends up going right towards Unruin, who is 100% a vampire. So it seems as though we're getting a whole bunch of classic movie monsters in more ridiculous ways, with Seal being a classic mummy and Unruin being a vampire. We'll see if any more show up, which would be very funny, as Andy will have to find a way to break free from Seal and go on the offensive afterward. So overall, I think I'm going to give this chapter a B. It was good. There wasn't much going on outside of the fact that Seal won, and then we see how Andy could potentially take out Seal in the end. We also got to see that Lucy is a bit ridiculous, which is very funny, as Andy says that she is basically unhealthy, that she could never be healthy, even though that was somewhat of an odd way of saying that and lying that she was a negator, but I thought it was very funny that her sickness is going to end up saving the day some way, somehow. And the next few chapters should continue to be exciting, as Andy will most likely get very close to saving the day. And I wonder how everything's going to work out, to a degree. Like, is God going to show up, or is more of his minions going to? And as much as Juize's proclamation of not needing the 101st cycle will end up proving false, but again, she will not go forward. It'll end up being Fuko. So we'll see how close this is to actually being over, or if we're going to have a second half to this story. I'm not leading in any direction. I think it could end and it could be a fun series as a whole, a nice light, unique story, or it could go longer and even build more of uniqueness to it. We'll have to see which way it wants to go. Now we're on to Sakamoto Days chapter 64, and this was a good chapter as we see both of our main groups fighting against their respective quote-unquote villains. You have Andy and his group fighting the group that caught him last week, the guys that caught him in the net and plan to kill them pretty much to get what they need. And we see Shin's group going against the girl who's a giant fan of Sakamoto. She's obsessed with him, and the kid that's with Shin kind of tells her that that's a dumb way to live, and she's now getting more and more serious and pissed off. So they're very much in trouble, which I think is very funny. Shin will really have to prove himself to be very strong, as well as the kid, because the kid was able to actually land a kick on the villain girl. So that battle will be very interesting to see how that unfolds. And the Sakamoto one was interesting in the fact that Sakamoto was able to have Akira escape the net, but then Akira was too afraid to really do anything until finally she snapped and didn't want her friends to be hurt, so she nearly killed everyone, showing that she has quite the potential to be an assassin. And Sakamoto was able to stop her and asks who her family is. And we learn that the other person that was always named with Sakamoto back in his training days is her ancestor, her grandmother, I think it might be, or mother maybe. It doesn't matter. Someone in her family was the other star pupil in Sakamoto's class of JCC agents. And so that was the one other person that Slur was talking about. And from the implications, Slur took care of her, meaning he killed her. So now this is an interesting wrinkle in the Sakamoto fighting Slur story. I'm still assuming that Akira will join the crew, especially after all of this. And I wonder how Sakamoto is going to deal with all of these new additions eventually. Because I would like if the story slowed back down for a little bit, just being something funny that now they're all at the store and they all have to try to cope with real life again and avoid spy stuff. That I think would be a very funny way to change the tone of the story again back to what it originally was, with the major threat of Slur ever present in the background. So overall, I think I'll give this chapter a B. It was good seeing the continued deep ties between Sakamoto and Akira, as well as seeing Shin continuing to have to prove that he is very much stronger than he once was against a very formidable foe. Where is the story going to go is very intriguing, as I really cannot predict what's going to happen as a story structure point, because things are all over the place. It can go any which way it desires, and it's hard to pinpoint one that would look like it's making sense, not something like One Piece or Black Clover, where it's very clear where something is going to be headed, as the decisions before have led to the most common outcome. So that was all of the major chapters. Again, it's a relatively short week, as both Mashal and Black Clover are not here this week. They're on break. So again, you had One Piece with some major news of an Oda-based decision, not necessarily good or bad. It is just a very Oda decision, which in itself is a very good thing, especially as if you trust him as a writer, then you believe he'll make whatever story plotline he decides that's unique to him make sense. It'll end up making sense in the end. You then had Undead, where you had a victory and a defeat in a way, and Sakamoto Days, where we got more information on basically everyone. So a lot of intriguing developments across the three major chapters, and we'll see if next week can really be a giant week of chapters, like a real round out of a lot of eventful things happening, as One Piece is not on break next week. So now for everything else, you have Jujutsu Kaisen, which was fine, My Hero, which was fine, and Blue Box, which continues to just be a standard romance story, and less about the actual sport, which I think is a shame, but overall, it's fine. It's not terrible. You then had Yazakura family, where the great mystery of why the eldest brother did what he did continues to be revealed, as the rest of the family outside of the main character were able to find him. So next week should be a massive battle or a big reveal on why the eldest brother did what he did. Then the elusive samurai was also good, having it that the main characters decided to attack the main villain. However, the main villain was able to sense out what was going to happen, and this fight is going to end in their failure in the most overpowering way possible. He'll barely escape and we'll probably lose a bunch of these retainers here, which is a very interesting decision to do, because this is a very tense part of this story so far, and I absolutely look forward to seeing what's going to happen next week. Next chapter. P times 6 continues to be very intriguing with this cast of characters, as well as the sister character. Her idol ends up arriving and telling her that she is a major disappointment to the idol character. Hopefully that made sense, but the story itself is just continuing to move in a very interesting pace, as well as slowly but surely building up a bunch of things. So I'm curious at how the next chapter is going to go, as the interest in this manga continues to grow, as the obstacles continue to seemingly pile up, as Lucky continues to try to learn as much as he can. So again, next chapter should be very good, and it's very interesting to see where it's going to go. We then had Ashimon, which was again good. The Todoroki Alliance is joining the main characters, and now the main crew is looking stronger than ever before. We'll see how long that lasts, as the major villain is always looming in the background, as well as they're going to need more allies if they want any hope of succeeding in this gaining control of the former syndicate plan. And Doron was good, as we have the main character fighting a major villain, and we'll see how far and how well he fights. Again, we'll have to see if this continues for a long time or if it's going to get axed fairly quickly. Him winning here, I guess, would be a major indicator, because if he could beat this monster here, then it's not a good sign this story is going to survive very long, because unless there's going to be more powerful foes later, which very well could happen, this feels like they're wasting strong potential villains just because they're afraid they won't have enough time to really develop them or have the characters develop and actually grow. Or it could just be that this will be very much a villain of the week type story, and they'll just keep getting more and more monstrous in power, which in of itself would actually be a fairly fun way of having the story go. So I believe that is all the chapters. They were all very good this week, with many things being intriguing and interesting in what decisions are being made, as well as seeing any new developments in certain characters and so on. I'm just rambling at this point. So like I said, with Black Clover and Mashal off, it left it this week feeling a bit lighter than usual, but that's fine on occasion. So hopefully next week is bigger and better than ever, with all of the stories coming back with major chapters and major news. So if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, and as always, thank you for watching.